From the very morning an important conversation started in Duke Adelhart's mansion, the guy couldn't even think that the girl wanted and came to talk about this very thing. She was very serious, and for a long time she didn't know how to start this conversation, but at the same time, there was no avoiding it, and sooner or later, they would have to talk about it anyway. At first they drank tea for half an hour and didn't even look each other in the eye. And then the guy started hinting that his free time was getting less and less. So it would still be a good idea to start a conversation, even if it's not going to be a good one. The girl explained that, and it's very hard to talk about it. But there's no point in hiding that Duke Adelhart is no longer the man she envisions her future with. It's like he's already sensing what's in store for him, and he's starting to look at her like an enemy, even though he should be. When suddenly, he had had enough. The Duke asked her directly what had brought her here and how he could help her. She tried her best to pull herself together, because he already knows where this is going and why she's here. The girl did not stall any longer. She confessed that she wanted to break off the engagement, and it would be better if he agreed to it at once and did not resist it. The Duke immediately became indignant. He doesn't understand what the problem is and what she doesn't like about him being her husband. The thing is that this marriage was initially calculated. Between them, there was never feelings, love, and trust. And without this, she does not need this relationship. The girl has long dreamed of falling in love for real and live with a man whom she will choose with her heart. A week before all this, in her past life, a girl gets in a car accident. She didn't feel a thing, and as soon as she opens her eyes, she realizes that everything around her bears little resemblance to her normal life. She has never seen such gorgeous rooms as the one she regained consciousness in. From that moment, she was already in an unfamiliar world and immediately ran to the mirror. It was as if she sensed something was wrong and decided to make sure of it. She was not happy at all. The girl was frightened and did not understand how such a thing was possible. She had not seen such stories even in movies or books. It was only after a while that she managed to find out that from that day on she had been in the body of the protagonist from one novel. This is the body of Isabella Vanon, married to Casus. She became Lucius's stepmother, a very wicked stepmother. She, like Lucius, is a bastard child, but unlike her, the boy was a favorite in the duchy, so Isabella was vilely jealous of him. She always told him that he should be treated the same way she was at his age and no other way. This led to constant insults towards the boy. After her misdeeds were discovered, she was kicked out of the duchy with no money in her pocket. Isabella died in an epidemic. That was the end of her, and nothing more is said about her in the novel. Meanwhile, the girl is getting used to her new life, and it seems while she hasn't married Cassis yet, she thought breaking off the engagement was easier than getting a divorce. If she doesn't want to die the way she should in the story, you could try changing her behavior and being polite to Lucius. It's all about making it work, and it's better if she starts doing it now, from the very first day she's in this world. But the main problem is that the girl doesn't want to be married to someone who hates her. She has no idea what you can do when you don't have to worry about making money anymore. It's strange that that's what she's worried about now. A lot of people dream of having problems like hers. She went straight to his office, and this is the conversation that started it all. She decided that first she had to divorce him as soon as possible, and then she could look for her life's work. In general, she immediately realized that she had to be careful not to let the original come true. Meanwhile, the Duke asks whose decision it was and who thought of it because everything was fine as it was. She replies that it's her idea, and if he doesn't like something, why not find another wife and live happily ever after with her for the rest of his life? In that case, he has nothing more to say, but at the same time, the guy's going to do everything he can to change the man's mind. He pretended he hadn't heard anything and asked her to go back to her room, so he decided to end this conversation and supposedly left on business. The girl grabs his hand. She didn't let him get away and wants to talk to the end, or rather, get his consent. The lady revealed that she knows the purpose for which he married her, so she sees no reason to continue living together. She didn't even hesitate to say that it was likely that her father had asked for this marriage in exchange for information important to the Duke. In fact, it was more of a threat, but in the end, it worked out well. The guy was even more indignant and asked that since she knew everything, why was she asking for a break in the engagement? Although this question was very strange, she had already explained everything anyway. Isabella, that if he's okay with it, to keep everyone happy, she can tell him some secret and he'll agree to the divorce. It is evident that he was at once interested in the proposition, but the Duke doubts that she has anything of interest to offer and asked why he should believe her. Since it wouldn't work to say she knew about it from a book, I had to reply that she couldn't tell him about it, but could promise that the information was absolutely verified and he wouldn't regret it. Only she and her father know about it, so if he wants to know, it's up to him. Isabella doesn't force it. She just offers that option. In the end, he says he's figured it out, and for now, he needs time to think it over and she can go for now. Isabella had gone about her business, and in fact she was very pleased with herself. She had almost succeeded, but still, something she really didn't like. The guy could have walked her out. The girl didn't do anything wrong and didn't deserve to be treated like that. And as soon as she was in the hallway, a kid came up to her and said that if she was doing well, he was inviting her to eat cookies, and it looked really cute. Despite what the relationship between them is in the original story, he continues to treat everyone well, no matter what. Meanwhile, one of the assistants comes up to him and reminds him that in such situations, you should say hello first and then say something, so she teaches him proper manners, even if the child is at home. He corrected himself at once and said he was very glad to see her. Isabella smiled and also greeted the child. If you look at it from the outside, there is nothing special in this situation. But for the boy, it was very unusual that someone said hello to him in return. He did not expect to hear anything and was surprised when Isabella smiled. She started talking to him very sweetly, as if he were her own child, as if some miracle had happened. The thing is, it's their first meeting, and in that case, she supported the idea with a tea party and said it was really nice to get him to propose like that. It's time to tell this sweet child who she is and why she'll be living in this house. She revealed that she would be his stepmother. Though not sure if it would last more than a few days, she had already asked for a divorce and may have rushed that information out of him. Maybe the kid shouldn't have known what she could have been to him, but you can't go back in time. What's said is said. How suddenly, instead of her, the assistant told her about it. She warned that the boy might not be used to it, for Isabella might leave any day. The girl tried to reassure him and reminded him again what a good boy he was, but unfortunately, there was no other way. After that, they had to go about their business. No one was in the mood for a tea party. It was as if the assistant wanted to ruin it on purpose, and she succeeded. Lucius Adelhart, the bastard son of Casus. In the original, he is as cold as his father, silencing his interlocutor with just one look. At the time when the guy announced Lucius as his successor, no one was happy about it. On the contrary, they just started to change his mind and resent him, even though it was just his personal business. They asked what he was talking about. Supposedly, they needed to take care of the Duchess and solve the problems with the real heir. Most were against having an illegitimate boy as an adopted boy. Someone else said they understood his concern for the younger Duke, but still tried to make it clear that his opinion would change at the sight of the consequences of such a decision. In response, he asked everyone to shut up, to be completely silent, and to listen carefully to what he was about to tell them. If anyone else hasn't figured it out yet, it's their personal choice. No one who disagrees can be destroyed at any very unexpected moment, maybe even today. Therefore, he advised against commenting on his decision, much less condemning it, finally warning that he was not going to repeat himself twice, and if there were no further topics for discussion, in which case he suggested that this meeting be concluded. Meanwhile, the Duke wanted to go outside and happened to see a child who also wanted to go for a walk and was tired of sitting in his room. Despite all the problems that surround him and await him in the future, the boy is very cheerful, and that everyone never ceases to be surprised. He continues to treat everyone well, even those who dislike him. The Duke worries that because of his soft character, he will face many difficulties and disappointments in the future, because not everyone will be like him. And meanwhile, at a tea party, 3 girls gathered to discuss the child's future. Most of them, like everyone else, started discussing his mom. They were embarrassed that she wasn't from an aristocratic family. Even though it's not their body, it seems that most people here are very fond of discussing other people's lives and pointing out some mistakes without noticing their own. But that's not all. They allowed themselves to discuss that if they were lucky enough to be in her shoes, after the wedding ceremony, they would immediately give the baby to someone else to start a new life and create a family of their own. Another friend said it was a very charitable thing to do, but she would have given it straight to the convent. Sometimes the boy heard these conversations and cried behind the wall. After that, he usually went to his room and did not sleep all night. He heard these voices everywhere, so he made himself believe that he would soon be sent somewhere else. Those people have no idea what it's like to live without a mother, and among those who want to get rid of him, he has no protection, no support, absolutely nothing. Almost every night when the moon appeared in the sky, he would say out loud and ask for a mother. The boy realized that it was impossible, but in his heart he still had hope that maybe the universe would give him such a gift. And meanwhile, Isabella is already at the Count Vanane's mansion. She hesitated for a long time, but she still came and started to stay somewhere else. The assistant met the girl back in the yard and was glad that she was finally back. It was very pleasant. Isabella can barely contain the vast amount of thoughts in her head. She wishes no one would meet her so she could go into her room and spend time alone in peace. But unfortunately, she is suddenly met by her half-brother. It's like he's already unhappy about something and is about to start asking a lot of questions. He asked where she had been, but the girl was so tired she had completely forgotten that he might be at the mansion too. As suddenly, he says that it's customary to answer when someone is asked a question. Isabella's half-brother's name is Derek Vanane, which is how he treated her most of the time. It was like he'd come out to spoil the mood, as usual. Though this time it couldn't be worse. She wasn't in the mood without him. Isabella's mother was a simple servant in the Vanane family, a woman of extraordinary beauty who once attracted the attention of Count Vanane. And so Isabella was born, from the moment of their first meeting. Not much time had passed, but for people it became a cause for gossip and discontent, as if there were more worthy girls around the Count. Concerned about her fate, she and her child decide to escape from the mansion. The woman knew that she would not be allowed to live here in peace, but soon she was overtaken by an illness. Anxious for her daughter to be left alone, she contacted the Earl, asking for help. But Earl Vanine, having received a letter of first time he found out she had a baby, so he hadn't been told she had run away. For a few days, he just didn't notice it and finally decided to destroy them. But luckily it turned out that after the meeting, he changed his mind and did the opposite. He let the girl go, but her mom couldn't survive. The father looked at his child and noticed that she looked very much like her mother. Accordingly, he could give her away profitably and get not a small reward. That was his first thought as soon as he saw his child. Eventually, he gave her a choice. The girl could choose one of the two. He said she could go with him or stay here, but only if she chose the first option. That was it. He promised to get a doctor for mom. Thus, she had almost no choice. Of course, the girl decided to help her mother and was forced to go along with him. At the mansion, Isabella is considered a person who should be ashamed to even exist in this world, and all because of her mother, who gave birth to her without being married, and who is also an attendant. Especially the second son, Derek, directed his anger at her openly. And meanwhile, since he had to be talked to, the girl said she was having a very difficult day and wouldn't want to talk to anyone. She wants peace and quiet, a good night's rest, and no one to talk to her, but he only resented it. He grabbed her arm and wouldn't let her go anywhere. He wasn't used to being ignored, so he decided to remind her who she was and that she had no place here. Isabella didn't argue. She asked him to leave and told him they had nothing to talk about. She showed that she wasn't afraid of him, and he was trying so hard in vain to appear more important in this house. With these words, the girl made her brother even more angry. He asked her how she dared to talk to him like that, and didn't she know what she could get for it? And she reminded him that she was the big sister, and she had the right to talk to him as she saw fit. It seemed to be unstoppable. He thought it was because of the engagement to the Duke, for she had not been so confident before and was afraid to even be in the same room with him. Isabella realized that he wasn't going to leave and decided to remind him that she could do a lot more good in the family than some. Her brother hadn't even been made an earl, and it wasn't clear why he thought he could talk to her like that. It only sounded hurtful to him that the guy couldn't help himself and just pushed her aside. Perhaps from the outside it didn't look very scary, but the girl was very scared. She didn't expect it and didn't have time to defend herself. Moreover, and at that moment she even lost consciousness and woke up the next day in her room. She remembers very well that she fell down the stairs, and if she could, she'd take revenge on her brother. He's been getting too much of it lately. The assistant came in and asked if everything was all right. She realizes that Mistress is probably in pain all over her body and thought she should be advised to lie in bed and not go anywhere. It turns out that this is her personal maid in the house where she lives since she was a child. Her name is Emily. She was always there and sometimes even helped her with some things. Isabella didn't even want to talk to anyone. She kept thinking about her brother and wanted to do to him what he had done to her. It was too humiliating, and there was nothing surprising in her desire. Meanwhile, Emily brought the painkiller and said that on the doctor's advice, she really needed a good rest and preferably not to leave the room. The girl thanked but never promised anything. And also, Emily came to deliver a letter from the Duchy of Adelhar. She suggested that most likely her husband was very eager to meet and may have invited her this way. At first, the girl didn't even want to accept the letter, and then thought she might read it, but whether to answer or not, she would think again. As it turned out, the assistant was a little mistaken. In fact, this letter was written by Lucius. The boy said that according to the teacher, he could invite someone to visit, and of course, he chose her. The child promised to make cookies even tastier this time and the most fragrant tea she could taste in her life. He asked to send a letter back to know whether to wait for her or not. From such words, the girl almost cried. She was very pleased to read it and wanted to hug this cute child, because he is the only person who literally smells of kindness. Isabella remembered her stepmother, who was like a real angel. She treated her as if she were her child. Her life was a fairy tale, as if in a dream. But at some point, it was over very quickly. The woman suddenly offered to give her to some other family or wherever, so she could have time to deal with the baby that was coming soon. She regretted overhearing the conversation, for afterward she could not sleep for a couple of days. She even felt like running away from that house. Isabella didn't want to feel like an extra here and thought that she could rid them of the problem herself. Just make the life disappear. After these memories, she finally decided that she would try to make Lucius's life the happiest it could be. At least as far as his childhood was concerned, the boy shouldn't continue to experience the same things that she had as a child. She quickly wrote a letter back and asked that it be sent to the Adelhart family. The assistant promised to do so as soon as possible and left to go about her business. After that, she remembered her brother and thought, why not get one last revenge on him? At the very least, he deserved it, and it would be interesting to see the look of fear in his eyes. Then he was clearly having fun and enjoying making fun of her. The idea to deal with him first and then break the engagement with Cassis already came up. However, even if she tears this dump up, Count Venane will set her up with someone again. First, you have to make sure she's a safe distance away from him. The girl walks over to the closet, which means she's about to leave. Meanwhile, she thinks about the fact that she has the money. But first, she needs to find an information guild. She's willing to put in the time, because the sooner she does, the sooner this will all be over. Meanwhile, at the Duke's house, the boy had already received a letter from Isabella. He was as glad as if he had received a birthday present, and of course he immediately asked his assistant to help him open it. The woman agreed and even offered to read the letter in his place, but he wanted to do it himself. So for him, it was something special. The letter reads as follows. Dear Junior Duke Adelhart, how are you doing? I am very grateful that you have invited me to tea again. But unfortunately, I will not be able to come to the tea party because it is not the right time. With respect, Isabella Venane. The first thing he said afterwards was that since he was a bastard child, therefore his father and Mistress Isabella did not love him. The assistant immediately decided to hold him and asked him where he had heard such nonsense. His father had always taken care of him, and so had Isabella. The boy's mood immediately soured. He began to blame himself very much. Although it is not even clear why, at such a moment, it is very important that the assistant was always near and did not go anywhere. Since the woman reads that things are not as bad as he thinks, the boy asked if he could persuade Mrs. Isabella to stay and not part with his father, to which the assistant replied that it was possible, but would have to try very hard, and if necessary, she would certainly help him in it. In that case, he thought that he could give her some special gift, and even if she left them, she would always remember who gave it to her and would remember Lucius almost every day. He knows that there are no such people in this world who do not like gifts. He wanted to choose something that she would be genuinely happy and use this gift, and preferably every day. The woman smiled and said that he will succeed. She believes that and will continue to support him, even if things don't work out. She realizes how important that is to him. And meanwhile, and forgotten already on some street, she tried to hide her face so no one would recognize her. She wants to do her thing quietly, without too much attention. As suddenly, she hears a very familiar voice of some child who addresses to the assistant and asks her to hurry up. The girl immediately turned around and looked at this boy. And as it turned out, it was Lucius. After that conversation, he went straight to the market with the woman and did not wait long. He runs so fast, as if it depends on whether Isabella will stay with them or not. But so far, he has not seen her yet. Most likely the girl will try to hide. She doesn't want to look him in the eye and upset the child that things will be a little different than he would like them to be. She put on her hood more tightly and walked off in the other direction altogether, so as to have as little chance of meeting on the way as possible. But at some point, the girl couldn't stand it and caught up with the kid. He looked at her as if he saw something that couldn't be. He didn't expect to see her here. His cheeks immediately flushed. He stopped talking. He He was in a sort of stupor. Lucius wanted to hug her very badly and even forgot to do it. And that wasn't all. And for his surprise, he even fell to the floor. And she reminded him that there were ice tiles, and it would be better if he got to his feet as soon as possible, and preferably to see a doctor at all. To which the boy replied that he was not going anywhere, as he had a very important mission. He had to find a present for her. He didn't even hide it, and told her everything. To which she says, "What gifts are we talking about?" Because his health is the most important gift to her. He didn't even know what to say to that. He looked at her with eyes as if they would have to part forever. Though the girl didn't say it, but the child felt it. Since they met here, and he realized she had no business being here, Lucius seized the opportunity and invited her to tea again. He wants it so badly that it's like he's not going anywhere until she says yes. The girl understands that very well. She knows how much it means to him to spend time with her and feel that someone needs him. No time for it, and she's already very late for where she was in a hurry, but still, she couldn't refuse and agreed to this tea party. From the outside, it may seem like she's not interested, but if she didn't have any plans, she'd be happy to agree to it right away. The child just doesn't realize that she has other things to do that may determine whether or not they can continue living together. Sometimes children do not even think about the fact that when adults refuse to do something or do not spend enough time with them, it does not mean that they do not care about them or that someone loves someone. They just have important things to do, without which serious problems can arise. Sometimes you have to sacrifice time with children to solve everything and go home safely. Meanwhile, Isabella wondered why he was so anxious to invite her to tea just today when she had so much to do. To which he says he had one request that she would probably refuse. He wanted to ask her to be his mom. Sounds too dreamy and like it's impossible, but still, he has hope that saying it was worth it. As soon as she says that, unfortunately it's impossible and there's no way she can be his mom, the boy almost cries and puts it down that it's all because he's a child out of wedlock. After this, Isabella herself almost cried. She could scarcely find the strength to answer that it was not the cause of it. When suddenly, the child's father comes into the room and asks with an indignant look, "What is going on here?" Did he have time to listen to the conversation, or did he feel that he should intervene, although it would be better if he had not come at all? Lucius reacted as if he was about to be punished for something. He's afraid of his father when he's not in the mood, but luckily with Isabella, he feels a little more confident. Instead of having a normal conversation and asking something, he starts yelling while they are talking alone, and closes the door so that no one can hear it. You'd think the Duke would have no reason to react this way after all. Isabella is very good to his child, but the thing is, few people know that he's not actually the boy's birth father. Lucius has never been told about it. And maybe after the girl asked for a divorce, the guy thought that she might tell the child this secret. Now it makes sense why he was so nervous when he saw them alone together. This is where things start to get interesting. There is a name that is forbidden to be mentioned in the Adelhart family, the eldest daughter of the former Duke Adelhart, and older sister of Cassis, Julia Adelhart. Cassis, who endured abuse from his father on the pretext of raising a stepchild, considered Julia the only person who could be called part of this family. Time passed. They both entered different academies. Now Julia could escape from her father. Cassis only felt relieved, but the Duke's bullying did not stop. He attacked the pregnant Julia, who did not even know who the father of the future child was. Cassis, who knew the truth, had always protected her from the Duke. The girl was always grateful to him for that. He became the only person she could trust. She thanked him every day for saving the child and herself. She saw him as a true protector and was afraid to even stay at home without him. It so happened that during childbirth her organism failed, and only the child survived. The guy was afraid that after her death they would start gossiping about the birth of a child out of wedlock. And to prevent this, he installed the boy Lucius, thus making him his own son, which is the whole secret of it. After that incident, Cassis did not look for the real father of the child, but a year ago a situation occurred that reminded him that it would be a good idea to do so. At some point, the boy suddenly lost consciousness, although he was just lying on the bed and did nothing. At that time, nothing like that had ever happened before. They had no idea what it was and how to help him. He had a symbol on his body that must mean something. It was something like a sun and a month. Some man started examining him and suggested that it might be a curse, and perhaps it had been passed down in the family for generations. He asked Cassis if he had any idea what it could be related to, but the man didn't know that Cassis wasn't his own father and had no idea what it all meant. That day, late at night, He started thinking very seriously about it. All they know is that it is a curse from the child's biological father. But they don't even know this man, and it is unclear how much the child will suffer because of this curse. It was the most difficult period in his life. The guy even thought about getting rid of all these problems, but suddenly changed his mind and even angry at himself that he even have such thoughts at all. Suddenly, the next day, Count Vanine shows up at his door unannounced. He was smiling from the start and hinted that he was here about Lucius's biological parents. The guy immediately started denying his words and said that this was his own son, and he didn't understand why he was laughing like that. The man realized that he was not going to admit anything and explained that he was well aware of the fact that the boy's birth mother was Julia. The man had brought with him a picture of the man who was the real father of the boy. After these words, Casus almost fainted. He did not think that his secret would be revealed so quickly and so unexpectedly. He felt too embarrassed and did not know what to say and whether it was worth it to continue to say anything and to resist. And also, he has one small photo of the child's birth father. It is unclear why he brought this information with him and how the photo might be needed. A little later, he said he had a very good offer that he couldn't refuse. That's when the conversation started. That he took Isabella as his wife, that's the agreement that the girl was talking about when she said that she knew exactly why he married her. The man offered the marriage in exchange for keeping the information about the boy's father a secret. That explains why the guy was so against the divorce. He had a good reason for it. But it's not clear how Isabella could have known about it. Even then, the man warned that if he tried to refuse or even thought about it, everyone around will know who is the real father of Lucius, and there will be a lot of questions. Why the guy all this time pretended that he was his real father and deceived the child himself. That's about how it really was. You can imagine how desperate Casus felt at that moment when even the girl suggested him to break the engagement and mentioned that she has information about Lucius's biological father. It explains why he is so much afraid of Isabella's private meetings with the child. When it came time to explain what they had discussed during the tea party, the boy said that it was not the girl's fault. It was he himself who invited her, to which he asked him to go back to the room, as if he didn't even want to listen to him. The boy felt as if he just didn't want to be listened to. He wanted to participate in the conversation and make sure Isabella was not punished. He even cried a little, and she felt very sorry for him. The girl promised that everything would be all right, and as soon as they talked, she would come right back to him. He listened to her and calmed down a bit. Left alone, the Duke did not stall for time. He asked to explain what was going on here. Isabella told him that she had originally met the younger Duke by chance in the center of town and accepted the invitation to have tea and saw nothing wrong with it. She started to apologize if this situation was unpleasant for him and decided to go straight away. But suddenly, he noticed something on her arm and asked her to stop. He wondered where the footprints came from and why she hadn't said anything about it. He changed very quickly and even started to worry, thinking it was because of her father. He had never seen such bruises on her arms and demanded to tell her where they came from. Supposedly, it was his duty to protect and take revenge on the one who had done such a thing. The girl replied that it wasn't him, and she wasn't going to talk to him about it because it was her personal business. Besides, today or tomorrow they could get divorced and remain strangers. It was just a matter of time. And to stop him worrying, Isabella replied that it wasn't something he should worry about. It wasn't what he thought at all. But he doesn't see it that way and says that's exactly what he needs to worry about right now. She's his wife, and as long as they're not broken up, he has the right to protect her. Plus, if she doesn't remember, he didn't accept her proposal and refuses to split up. And also, he promised that he would do everything he could to prevent this from happening. She would be his wife. And he, as a fiancé, thinks he has every right to create such issues and pry into her personal life. Whether she liked it or not, for the time being, it was a fact. He would not allow any more of that sort to appear on her body. To make sure he'd calm down and not ask any more questions, she told him she'd fallen down the stairs yesterday, and it was her own fault. To which he replied that everything was clear now, and reminded them that when they were ready and it was time for them to return. But where exactly, he did not specify. After this conversation, the guy suspected that she wasn't telling him something, and since she had been home lately, he thought the bruises weren't her fault. So he asked the assistant to find out what her relationship was with her family, because maybe someone had hurt her there and had done it on purpose, which he was pretty sure of. He looked closely at her wound and realized that there was no way it could have appeared just because she had fallen. She had either been pushed from a great height or done something like that. He feels that if he's right, he won't be able to let it go and will be forced to deal with it, at the very least punish the man who dared to harm his wife. It turned out they'd gone their separate ways. They all had their own things to do, so there was no point in staying together. The girl asked her driver for a ride to Courtney Street, but the man reminded her that the owner had told her to take her to Vann County, and he had heard nothing about Courtney Street. She explained that she had very important things to do there, and if she didn't get there today, there would be a lot of problems. She would have to get up early tomorrow and only waste time, although everything could be solved today. So she continued to hint that she really needed it, and surprisingly, the man agreed. He let her stay here for half an hour and asked her not to stay too long. Very interesting what she was up to and why it was so hard to come here. Even in the morning, she had no plans to come here, and after talking to the Duke, she suddenly needed to be here. She opens the door to some place and immediately asks for some delicious and unusual drink to be prepared for her. The thing is that everything happened for a reason. There is a hidden meaning in all her actions and requests. The name of the drink was the password of the Information Guild. Also, she knocked twice on the table for a reason, and she ordered a drink with lemon and ice on purpose, so the person announces her intentions to meet with the guild leader, Ciro. Surprisingly, the girl remembered the story so well that she remembered that in the future, 13 years after the death of Casus, feeling betrayed, he would exchange information about his biological father with the Ciro. After that, he would develop a special relationship with their leader, Samuel. This alone was enough to build trust, however. There was one reason he wanted to hire Ciro specifically, because of the tendency of information guilds to only share information. If the girl knows something the guild would be interested in, she's sure she can talk to Samuel in person. An assistant at the place says he's already contacted the boss, and the boss asked him to wait a while and treat the guest to a meal. First, he offered her a glass of water. The girl thanked him and said she just wanted something neutral. And also, she looked at him suspiciously and noticed that there was some very unusual scent coming from the guy that was hard not to notice. There is something that is hard to find for any amount of money, namely the Lycera plant, which has an excellent calming effect. She suddenly touches his arm and asks him to come closer. The guy doesn't understand what that means and how he should react to it. And after that, something even more unexpected happens. She starts laughing and says something like, "There's no reason to wait any longer." And at this point, she calls him Mr. Samuel, who he supposedly only talked to and said was his boss, when in fact, apparently he's standing right in front of her right now, and it's unclear why he pretended to be a regular assistant. The guy hadn't expected it, and wondered how she had guessed it all. Usually, no one ever knew it, and she suddenly felt it in a matter of minutes. Isabella said that she had heard that Mr. Samuel had a sick little sister, so he always burned the plant because of its calming properties. She confessed that she had just smelled the aroma and knew it all at once. And also, that's not the only thing that made her declassify him. The girl notices a ring on his hand that has an amazing ability. Is an artifact that changes a person's appearance, meaning that the real Samuel looks nothing like she sees him in front of her. In that case, he could hide nothing from her any longer, returned to his real appearance, and said that perhaps she was worth talking to. He immediately changed his appearance, changed everything, absolutely everything. He became a very handsome guy. You can see at once that he is a special person, and it is clear why he had to hide his real appearance. So he would be recognized by almost everyone who saw him on the street, and to avoid wasting his time. She immediately explained what she came for. She needed him to cash in those jewels, and also to find a woman. She's a doctor, she has red hair, green eyes. She lives in or near the capital. The doctor was developing a cure for Samuel's little sister, and also, her name is Erin Ronner. The guy immediately agrees and asks how much is there. The girl replies that there should be enough to search, but she plans to continue her business relationship with him, and this isn't the last time she'll come to him. So her price, Isabella plans to tell him how to cure his sister. She's sure he'll be interested. After all, he can't do anything about it for years and would love any help he can get. Samuel didn't expect this and admitted that Arya has been sick since birth, but so far, no one has found a way to help her in any way. He wants to know why she's so sure of what she's saying and how he can trust her. The title of the novel, Arya of Light. In other words, Samuel's younger sister, the protagonist of the novel. Though she was weak in health, she was the warmest of all. Lucius had lost the ability to trust people after the betrayal of Casus and Isabella, but could only open his heart to warm Arya, and the powerful force that was destroying her was the very light that could heal Lucius from his curse. She advised him to boil a decoction of the flowers and give it to his sister. This flower grows in a kingdom nearby and helps to increase physical strength. Despite all the words and advice, he still wonders why he should believe her. But it's very simple. According to Isabella, he has to decide for himself whether to believe her or not. But he had decided for himself that until her words about the flower were confirmed, he could give her no information, and she must understand that. Of course, Isabella wasn't surprised and said it would be nice if he'd hurry up and find that girl. If he supports Aaron and she develops a cure for Arya, it'll make it easier for her to gain Samuel's trust, a lot easier. In that case, they agreed, and lastly, the guy asked if there was anything else she wanted to ask of him so she wouldn't have to go back to him anytime soon. In that case, she didn't miss an opportunity and said she needed one more thing, really wondering what it was. Meanwhile, the girl had already returned to her parents' home and was immediately invited to dinner. She was on time, but that didn't mean that anyone was happy to see her here. Initially, she didn't want to join them at all. She didn't even want to come to this table. She had already noticed the displeased looks on her and realized that she was offered it only out of politeness. But so be it. She was already at the table, and from the first second, her father asked why she was looking at him so strangely. He's not in the mood anymore. Although before his daughter came in, everything was fine, and some were even laughing. The girl replied that she was just thinking about her own thing, and it had nothing to do with looking at someone else. Then she looked at all these dishes and wondered, for usually the dinner was more modest than tonight. It looked very suspicious, as if there was an occasion or they were celebrating something. Most of the dishes, she doesn't even know what they are called. It's as if it's a holiday she's forgotten about. Or maybe she's just imagining it, and it's just an ordinary dinner that doesn't differ from all the previous ones. Meanwhile, her father turns to her, and she already realizes that this conversation will not go quietly. She has prepared herself and asks what happened. He said he had heard that his daughter had visited the mansion yesterday, sending his husband to ask why she thought it was all right not to warn him, for as a father, he supposedly ought to know where she was. Has the man forgotten that she is an adult? Moreover, his daughter is married and can come to his house whenever she wants without telling anyone about it, especially people who communicate with her only these benefits and do not even hide how they really feel about her. It would have been fair to lie and say anything but the truth. But the girl decided to do otherwise. She took a chance and answered that she wanted to ask the Duke to break off the engagement, and of course, after that, her father's reaction was quite obvious. Isabella was even afraid to look him in the eye. He thought he'd just heard or imagined it, so he asked me to do it all over again. Isabella smiles and says he didn't hear that. She says she doesn't understand what the big deal is. After all, it's her private life, and she can do what she wants even if someone doesn't like it. At that moment, he got up from his seat, went over to his daughter and wanted to hit her very hard. And it's not even surprising that no one stopped him. He had time to do it, and Isabella didn't even have time to do anything. Then, he tells her to stop getting on his nerves and ruining everyone's mood, because it's not funny and he doesn't understand why she thinks she can make those decisions without his knowledge. It was a very odd question on his part, but still, the daughter remained silent, and he started to leave and said he would talk to the Duke some more about the matter, and she might not hope to have the marriage annulled. Isabella said nothing in response. She has no desire to argue with him or order anything. She will just silently prove that he no longer has the right to tell her anything and make a decision for her. It may seem like that's the end of it, but the conversation isn't over yet. After her father, her brother started talking to her. He also thinks she's saying some crazy words and doesn't understand the need to listen to the elders here. At this point, he suddenly didn't hold back and confessed how long he dreamed of getting rid of her. And after that, when she'd done to her father and not listened to him, he'd do everything he could to make his dream come true as soon as possible. And then, he gave her one last chance to apologize to him personally, right here and now. But of course, that wasn't going to happen, and odds were he even expected it. It sounded more ridiculous than convincing. Isabella made it clear that he would never wait for her to apologize to either of them. It was impossible no matter how much they wanted to. When suddenly, she took out a jar of liquid, opened it discreetly, and started pouring it on his feet. Luckily, no one noticed it. This way, the girl is trying to give him a second chance to finally change and stop being so unpleasant and rude. It turns out back then, A girl asked the guy for a remedy and said she needed to get someone to fall down the stairs, but that the injuries would not be severe and he had just the thing to help her. He said it was a relatively simple request. For the wish she was voicing, he wouldn't even have to try to help make that wish come true. In fact, and also at that moment, she was uncomfortable about having to hurt someone. She normally never did that, but she had to. He's the one who gave her the jar she poured on her brother's shoe, and it's some kind of blue liquid, and it's unclear how it's going to help her. Meanwhile, when she had already done the deed, I wanted to leave the place as soon as possible. She had no desire to see these people any longer. Meanwhile, at the Duke's house, as usual, some investigations are being made to help Isabella, the lad taking a serious interest in the fact that she is disliked at home. Meanwhile, an assistant comes to him and tells him that he already has the results of the investigation. It's not much, but it should be enough, at least at first. The aide said that the Count only outwardly pretends to care for his daughter, but inside the mansion the situation is the opposite. She is neglected and treated worse than a stranger or an enemy. Moreover, as far as he had been able to learn, the Countess had even previously abused the lady. Under the pretense of classes, she had been restricted in her food and kept under house arrest. In which case, the lad could not help wondering, what about the beatings of the... That interests him most. But as far as the aide knows, nothing of the sort has happened, but the Duke is still sure it's impossible. If it's nothing like that, how do you explain the fact that the wound on your arm is so bad it's been there for days? In that case, he had no choice but to go to her parents' mansion to see for himself. The assistant was not prepared for that. He asked why he had made such a sudden decision, because maybe everything could be solved in some other way, and he did not have to act so quickly. To which he replied that there was something he needed to check, and he had no desire to wait much longer for something else to show up on her body that she would be afraid to admit about. The next day came. Casus ordered a carriage at once. He had gone to them from the morning and had not regretted his decision. He was sure that everyone would have done so in his place. It would allegedly be wrong to ignore such a problem, or at least not to try to make sure that Isabella could feel safe at home and that she had nothing to hide. There is a possibility that she is hiding the truth from him just to avoid damaging the family reputation. But this is wrong, and he should be convinced. Of course, he could have asked her directly, but she doesn't say anything and has left him no other choice. Even if he got her to talk about it, she'd still deny anything and convince him there was nothing to worry about. The guy still can't believe he's acting so impulsively as never before. It usually took him a long time to make even the slightest decision, especially to go somewhere. Now he does not understand or recognize himself, for the carriage is on its way. There is no turning back. He must do what he has planned. Meanwhile, he is already near the family's house, and suddenly, he is stopped from the threshold as if the girl is not feeling well, and it will be better if he comes next time. It seems suspicious to him at once, for what is such a bust that a husband comes even when his wife is unwell? It is just right. And if they are telling the truth, all the more so that they should be glad that they have come to support her. The Duke said nothing. He only thought of how she could have become so bad in one morning. For before that, she had been in a perfect condition, and nothing was to be expected. In spite of all these words, and of the fact that one of the maids tried so diligently to stop him, he replied that he had to see his wife, and they had no right to stop him. It turns out that the maid remembered very well the situation when the father hit his daughter, and after that, she had a huge red stain on her face, and it would be better for everyone that the guy didn't know and didn't see it. Meanwhile, the girl was already awake. She immediately went to the mirror to see what her face looked like. It was as if she felt that her husband was coming to her and she would have to hide it somehow. But how to hide it would have to be thought out. Hardly anyone would help her with it. And even if she asked, everyone would pretend that they were very busy and didn't have time for it. Meanwhile, the personal assistant comes in and says her brother fell down the stairs, just like she wanted. She had to pretend to be very surprised and worried about the situation. But in fact, Isabella was glad. She had gotten her revenge much easier than she had thought she would. She learned that her brother had most likely broken one arm, but it just so happened that all the doctors were on vacation and no one would be able to help him anytime soon. The girl could barely contain herself. She's inside very happy, but at the same time, forced to show how much she was upset. Her mood immediately lifted, wanting to enjoy the day and just smile. That was the first good news she'd heard today. She won't see her brother at all for a while. He won't be able to leave his room for at least a few days. After that, she immediately decided to pretend to be a little uncomfortable. ostensibly because of the situation with her brother, all to just relax and enjoy the peace of mind. When suddenly, a helper knocked on the room and said that she had a guest arriving. There was no way they could hold him back and stop him from coming into her room. The girl has no idea who it could be, and the helper is afraid to say who came to her. She's sorry they didn't succeed in stopping him. Isabella asked her to calm down and asked her why there was such a fuss. Why couldn't she tell who had come at once? After all, she didn't mind meeting anyone at all. Ta says Duke Cases has arrived. She told him how hard they tried to tell him that today was not the best day to meet, as the lady is not feeling well. But he didn't stop it. It was the first time he'd come unannounced since they'd known each other, and if he hadn't had that red spot on his face, it would have been fine. But now he had to think of a way to cover it up. The thought occurred to her that perhaps the guy had come to give an answer about breaking off the engagement. At least she really wanted to hope so. But it was unlikely he would come in person. One could just send a letter, meaning he was interested in something else that could only be done or seen in person. The question arises how to go out to him in this form. At least, you need to spend time on makeup, and it is not excluded that he will come to the room earlier, as soon as he gets tired of waiting outside. In that case, the girl asked to go back to the guest and say that she didn't want to see anyone and wasn't feeling well. The assistant came back. The Duke asked her to tell her that he insisted on this meeting, and right now, he would wait for her in the living room and wouldn't leave until they had talked. It's all very complicated. She doesn't have a single idea. Isabella is afraid that he could walk into her room any moment if he finds anything too suspicious. He's never been talked into coming to her before or refused to talk to her. In that case, all she had to do was ask her assistant to help her prepare and hide all the flaws and consequences of the conversation with her father. She's very good at it. It's not the first time the assistant has applied this kind of makeup and hidden different spots on her face. So the girl had no doubt that everything would work out and she would be able to go out quietly to her husband, that he wouldn't even notice anything. Except that this time it turned out that the wound could not be hidden. It is too bright red. In this case, some kind of mask to hide half of the face would help. But that's not an option. The guy's gonna want to take that mask off and see if there's something she's hiding from him. They started to get very nervous and at the very last moment, decided that they could wear a headdress with wide margins to somehow hide the face and give shade to the right place. In just half an hour, Isabella was ready. She quietly left the room, but she felt very uneasy inside. And meanwhile, as soon as the butler knew that the girl had left her room and was going to see her guest, he advised that she had better go back now. Isabella explained that her husband was waiting for her, and there was no way she could ignore him, or it would only get worse. To which he replies that some mistress will talk to him instead of her, and you don't have to worry about that. They've taken care of everything in advance. In fact, the girl was only happy about it. She realized that mistress had decided to make her move, and in fact, it was even better. Now she had no reason to go back to the room. She's anxious to come quickly to her husband and tell him everything as it really is. She would listen to no one, and gladly decided to see him. The girl went to the door and heard the lady tell her that Isabella was not feeling well, but at the same time, the lady was already anxious to disturb them. Mistress, she begins to suggest that he see his wife the next day or any other convenient time, but not today. In that case, the girl enters the room with a smile to spoil the reputation of this man who pretended to be a noble lady all the time. Isabella had already forgotten about her red spot on her face. She didn't care about it now. The main thing was to make someone scared and stop feeling smarter and more important than everyone else. The girl apologized for keeping her husband waiting and said she was very happy to see him, and then asked why he had not warned her about the visit in advance, so she could have prepared in advance, and he would not have had to wait for her so long. He didn't even answer that question and immediately noticed her huge headdress. It was time to explain what she was wearing it for. But he didn't wait for that either. He just took it off and saw it all with his own eyes. Isabella didn't even cover her face with her hands. She did everything in her power. This time it made sense to him. He smiled slightly and asked if this was also from an accidental fall or if there was some other situation that we could not worry about. Mistress decided to answer instead and explained that their girl was a bit inattentive and kept falling down the stairs. The guy didn't listen to these words and asked Isabella to tell him straight how it really was so he wouldn't have to check anything out. She's not sure what he's trying to accomplish or what it means, and she has the idea of tricking him again, but wonders what the point is, because maybe he can help and protect her next time. or make sure no one else dares to do that to her. The guy asks her directly who hit her because it's more than obvious. He walked over to her, touched her face, and began to look at the wound from different angles. It all made sense to him at once. She didn't even have to answer anything now. All that's left is to find out who did it and who dared to hit his fiancée, one he's not going to turn around and will deal with whoever that person turns out to be. Mrs. was very frightened and said she had no idea what he was saying. I'm like, this family doesn't do something like that. Here all conflicts are solved with words and everyone knows about it. In that case, he decided that he couldn't let his bride stay here. He decided to take her to his mansion immediately, and if anyone objected, they would regret it very much. So the guy doesn't advise stopping him from doing it or even hinting that someone doesn't like something. He doesn't want to listen to anything else. The Duke took his wife by the hand and went outside with her. He doesn't even have any desire to see her parents. Isabella is actually glad. She's so sick of being here that she doesn't mind going back to his place and staying there for a while. She thought that perhaps there would be more free time. She would not be so much nervous, and even during the usual dinner and any other meal, when a girl is at home, this pastime turns most often into some kind of conflict, and it is very annoying. Meanwhile, they're in the carriage going home, and he's asking her a lot of different questions, and she wants to be quiet, or at least talk about it later. Which is very strange. At some point, she becomes nervous and indignant that she is not very happy that he came to her. The girl did not notice how she changed her mind, although just a few minutes ago, she was very happy with it. It's not impossible that she's just sticking to the way she usually talks to him. She just can't talk to him calmly. You have to pretend like you're not happy about something all the time. In this case, since she has already started talking, the guy asked how she forgave such behavior to her father, and why, instead of help, she wants to break up with him and break the engagement, because he is the only one who can help her, and, if necessary, to protect her. The girl replies in the same words as usual, that he need not worry about her so much. It is her business, and the only thing she needs is to get the consent to the dissolution of the marriage, in which case he wondered what he was to her now. Still her husband or a stranger for a long time now. Isabella did not hide anything. She confessed that it is so, and it is very good that he realizes it. After that, he wanted to tell her something straightforwardly. As soon as they got engaged, she became part of the Adelhart family, so breaking the engagement is impossible. He was happy to remind her of that, and warned her that no matter how hard she tried to do otherwise, she wouldn't succeed. And as for her private affairs, he thinks he has every right to interfere, as he is her husband, and if it were not for him, it is unlikely that she would have been able to escape from the house and avoid the torments which she is still trying to hide from him. She still continues to deny everything and says it's none of his business. The girl admits that the only thing he can do to help her now is to keep quiet and let her live at his house, and when needed, agree to divorce. And that's it. She's not interested in whether he has any feelings, whether they've appeared during this sham marriage and everything else. She wants to start a new life and move somewhere far away so she doesn't see anyone anymore. All he has to do is smile and repeat everything he just said. He will not give her a single chance to avoid and fall in love with someone else. She has to realize and accept the fact that it will never happen. She will stay by his side forever.